The Real Vikings, Craftsmen, Traders, and Fearsome Raiders by Melvin Berger. Essential question: how can learning about history help people today? The Vikings often sailed their majestic longships from Scandinavia and swarmed ashore to rob their neighbors, including the monks of Lindisfarne, England, in 793. Raiding, however, does not tell the whole story of the Vikings. Who were the Vikings? From the Lindisfarne attack and the many other attacks that followed arose the popular, though now disputed, belief that all Vikings were cruel, ruthless pirates and murderers. Archaeologists have recently uncovered many remains from the Viking Age, the period from around 800 to 1100, that give a more balanced view of Viking life than previously held. As experts dig in the places where Vikings lived, they are finding many everyday objects preserved in the soil. These include coins and silver jewelry, carved animal bones, furniture, clothing, boots, and weapons. Archaeologists are also uncovering the foundations of buildings and the remains of large ships. From studies of these finds, scholars have learned that the majority of Viking Age Scandinavians did not go out raiding. Instead, most of them stayed home, where they farmed, raised cattle, and hunted and fished. Some built ships. Viking craftsmen produced a variety of goods in their workshops. Viking merchants traveled widely, trading these goods for materials from other lands. Egil Skallagrimsson, the hero of Egil's saga, embodied both sides of the Viking character. According to the saga, he was tough and cruel, but at the same time he won fame as a merchant, farmer, and great poet. A dig in what is now Dublin, Ireland, revealed the wooden planks of a Viking road and the remains of houses and shops. Evidence from Viking graves tells us about everyday life. Some men and women were buried with their most valuable possessions and occasionally with their horses and dogs. Some people were buried with fine wooden ships or within enclosures of stones arranged in bold shapes. The ship settings suggest that Vikings thought that death was followed by a voyage to the next world. Clues to Viking life and beliefs also come from their ancestral history and heroic legends, which families once passed on by word of mouth. On long, dark, cold winter evenings in Viking lands, family elders repeated these stories, sometimes known as sagas, again and again. Later, long after the end of Viking Age, scribes wrote down the sagas. Among the most famous tales are Egil's Saga, Eric the Red Saga, and the Greenlander Saga, all of which people still enjoy reading. The few written records left by the Vikings consist of inscriptions on gravestones, road markers, weapons, and jewelry. The Vikings wrote in letters called runes, which also served as magic symbols. The 16 letters of the runic alphabet were angular in shape, which made them easy to carve into hard surface, such as stones or metal. Although many runic stones were memorials to dead relatives, other inscriptions marked property boundaries, noted important events, or offered thanks to a god. From archaeological excavations, sagas, runs, and the writings of their enemies and victims, we've learned much about the Vikings, a people who triumphed over the cold and isolation of their homelands to forge a distinctive culture and destiny. At home in Scandinavia, Hedeby, a large import town in Viking times, is the most thoroughly explored of all Viking sites. From remains that archaeologists have uncovered there, we have a fairly good idea of what a Viking town looked like and how ordinary people lived there. Both a fort and a trading center. Hedeby is located at the southeast corner of the mark, facing the Baltic Sea. In Viking times, a high wall of earth surrounded the town. In some places, the wall was 40 feet tall, the height of a four-story building. People had to walk through tunnels in the wall to get in or out of Hedeby. A small brook ran through the center of the town, providing the residents with water for drinking and washing. Hedeby had at least two main streets, both paved with planks of wood. Most houses were built of wattle and daub, flexible willow branches threaded in and out of posts, and covered with mud and cow dung. Wealthy people live in wooden houses built from tree trunks, which were split lengthwise and placed upright in the ground to form a continuous wall. Other houses were made with wooden planks placed horizontally. Covering the house were roofs of reed thatching or sod, thick matted grass growing in a thin layer of earth. Behind each house was an outhouse, a well, a cesspool, and a pit for garbage. Reconstructions of 9th century buildings. These houses are found in Hedeby, Denmark, once the largest Viking town, a busy trading center. Hedeby had a population of about 1,000 to 1,500 people in Viking times. A bird's eye view of Hedeby shows the many houses crowded together, the farms on the outskirts of town, and the sea. Perched amid metalworking tools, a delicate animal ornament reflects the artistry of a Viking jeweler. Viking craftsmen used molds such as the dragon's head mold at left to produce a variety of metal objects. Rich merchants and craftsmen in Hedeby live in large wooden houses that measured about 16 by 40 feet. The living room had a central fireplace with a cooking pot hanging over the hearth. The fireplace provided both heat and light. A small hole in the roof let the smoke out. Low earth platforms built up on both sides of the fireplace served as benches for sitting and sleeping. The houses had no windows. Light came from the fireplace or from lamps, which were small iron or soapstone balls holding wicks, probably made of plant fibers, for burning oil. Still, it must have been dark indoors, as well as smelly and smoky. So many tasks were probably done outside. The wattle and daub huts of the poorer people of Hedeby were about 9 by 12 feet. They had a fireplace in one corner and earthen benches along the walls. From objects found at Hedeby, it appears that many of the townspeople worked as merchants and craftsmen. Some of the craftsmen made jewelry. Others were expert glass blowers who produced everything from glass beads for necklaces to drinking cups. Some craftsmen carved objects of horn or bone. Still others made their living weaving and sewing cloth. Archaeologists have found two important tools that Viking craftsmen used to make marvelous objects from metal: the crucible and the mold. The crucible, a pot of hard fire clay, allowed workers to melt metal at very high temperatures before shaping it. Molds, also made of clay, made it possible to easily produce a great many objects, from pots to rings to battle axes to statues. Analyze the text. Compare contrasts. Use information on this page to compare and contrast the houses of the poor and the wealthier people in Hedeby. Viking merchants brought fine goods from Germany, France, England, Constantinople, and Persia to trade in Hedeby. Indeed, people from all over Scandinavia visited the town's bustling market to buy jewelry, silk, lace, and other luxuries. Slaves captured on raids were also traded at Hedeby. While some Vikings lived in towns such as Hedeby, most people were farmers and countryside. A typical farm contained the family house, stables, and barns for the farm animals, a workshop to make metal tools, and small huts for slaves. Farms on the coasts usually had a shed to hold the farmers' boat during the winter months. Farmers raised mainly corn, peas, cabbage, barley, and oats. They kept cattle both for meat and for milk. The farmers' wives turned the milk into butter and made cheese, which they kept in cold storerooms, using the winter snow as a kind of deep freeze. They also pickled and smoked meat and stored dried peas and beans. Without these preserved foods, the people would have had nothing to eat during the winter. Every member of a farm family shared in the work. Men worked in the fields, hunted and fished, and looked after the livestock. Women preserved and cooked the food, cared for the children and the sick, spun and wove wool, and sewed, embroidered, and washed clothes. They ran the farm while their husbands and sons were away fishing or on trading or raiding voyages, sometimes for months or years at a time. Children helped their parents around the house and farm. Even the youngest ones contributed by feeding the animals or gathering firewood. Viking family groups were large. A man and his wife, their children, including older sons with their wives and children, and the grandparents all lived together on the family farm. When a daughter married, she usually left home to join her husband's family. Vikings ate two main meals a day. The women served the first meal at about 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, which was after the farmers had already worked in the fields for about 2 hours. The other meal, which they ate at about 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening, marked the end of the day's work. At dinner, members of the family sat around the table, sometimes on the same benches they slept on at night. They ate off a rectangular wooden platters or throw soapstone balls, using only spoons and knives which they carried in their belts. Forks were a later invention. In good times, Viking families supped on soups and stews of beef or mutton or on fish from the sea. Women roasted meat on a huge spits over the hearth and cooked vegetables in big iron cauldrons. They baked bread in stone ovens or on long-handled flat metal griddles placed on the ashes of the fire. When not working, Vikings played games such as chess and went swimming and skiing. A board game called Marrows, which is similar to checkers, has been found in Vikings' graves. Other recreational activities included fencing, running, and wrestling, as well as training falcons to hunt wild birds and animals. Winter sports included racing on snowshoes and ice skating. Skates were made of sharpened animals' bones attached to shoes with leather straps. Skaters used long, sharpened poles to push themselves on the ice. In warmer weather, ball games were popular. Analyze the text. Main ideas and details. What is the main idea of this selection? What details do the authors give to convey the main idea? The Vikings were fond of music. They celebrated victories and festivals in song, which might be accompanied by harps and lyres. From findings at various archaeological sites, we know that the Vikings also had simple wind instruments. Pipes unearthed in Sweden were made of hollowed-out animals' bones, with holes drilled along the length to produce the different tones. Carved from walrus tusk, these ivory chess pieces date back to 12th century Norway. If a girl wanted to marry into a good family, she had to be able to sing and play an instrument. Boys also had to be music, but they needed to master other skills as well, especially the use of weapons. One young Viking man boasted, "There are 9 skills known to me. At the chessboard I am skillful. Runic writing I know well. Books I like. With tools am handy. Good with snowshoes. Rowing and shooting, and expert with harp and verse." Life was hard in Viking times, but there was obviously still time to relax and have fun. Analyze the text. Author's purpose. What is the author's perspective on the Vikings? How do the authors communicate this in the text?